Now I request the next speaker, Dr. Ben Vershbow. Mr. Vershbow is the Director of Community Programs at the Wikimedia Foundation, the non-profit organization supporting Wikimedia, Wiki Data. I think anything that starts with Wiki is under your umbrella. not all? Okay. Okay. Because I saw a list of words starting with Wiki. A dozen words, okay. He leads globally distributed team focused on growing participation and partnership across the Wikimedia movement in key knowledge areas such as Glam, education, science, and gender diversity. Ben comes from a theater and literature background. That's interesting. But fell down the internet rabbit hole 15 years. Hope you are not under the stone. Okay. And digitally publishing pioneer then. He went on to work for more than 80 years at the New York Public Library, where he founded NYPL Labs, a program focused on activating heritage collections through open access, crowdsourcing, and collaboration with artists, technologists, scholars, and other institutions. He currently lives in Philadelphia. Over to Ben.
Thank you very much. Thank you to Professor Das and to Plaban and Nan and the whole NDLI and UNESCO team for having us here, for having me and my colleagues and members of my community at this conference. This has been such a joy and such a revelatory experience. And having spent many years, not as a librarian, to be very clear, but working in libraries as a fellow traveler and collaborating with libraries, so many familiar issues, so many common challenges, but also many familiar things seen anew, in a new light, in a new context. So it's been a real gift to be here. So thank you for inviting us. The introduction did a lot of the work for me of giving a bit of background, but as was mentioned, I came to the Wikimedia movement, and we describe it as a movement, a social movement, via the Glam sector, the galleries, libraries, and archives sector, working for over 8 years at the New York Public Library. I was not deeply immersed in the Wikimedia community, although I had glancing encounters and was always a fan and a supporter and an advocate. But it was coming from the space of one of our key allies that was actually what directed me toward the Wikimedia movement. At the New York Public Library, I started a team called NYPL Labs, a small kind of digital skunk works, doing small rapid experiments with special collection material, archival material, historical material, and finding ways to engage our public to help develop it with us, to extract data, to create new data sets, to create new forms of engagement. So this swiftly snowballed into being charged with rehabilitating all our digital access platforms for collections and and taking on our digitization operations as well. So in a very short matter of time, I found myself leading an entire digital library operation, and I'm still not quite sure how that happened. But it was an amazing gift, an amazing experience, and gave me a great grounding in this sector, which has served me well as I've gone into this new adventure. And so now I have the great privilege of working for the organization that supports Wikipedia. And Wikipedia has always, I think, long before I joined as an employee, has always exemplified for me what was best about libraries, but in a digital context, the public option for reliable knowledge. And I think it still, to this day, kind of stands as a still surviving remnant of an earlier web, a web that we had great hopes for, and that we've seen start to kind of degrade and centralize and kind of become increasingly polluted. It's a great honor and a great thrill to be part of this, to see how we can take it forward to its next chapter. But of course, I would like to remind you that the Wikimedia movement is about much more than just Wikipedia. We're actually a whole fleet of open knowledge projects, some of which you may have heard of, some of which you may have not. But Wikimedia Commons, Wiki Data, which has gotten a lot of airtime in this conference, Wiki Source are some of our most important projects. But it's really a whole ecosystem. And it gets a remarkable amount of usage. This is the only kind of non-commercial, non-profit, ad-free website that is at the top tier of usage on the internet. This really is, it falls directly into the kind of the habitual information-seeking behaviors of millions, billions of people. It's just kind of staggering to kind of contemplate how much reach that this grassroots project has attained and is maintaining and gradually growing. And just a quick overview. Just you can sort of scan through this, but over 21 billion page views a month. Nearly half for mobile, which is something that we're really having to reckon with. And to be clear, about half for English Wikipedia. So it's still the dominant, kind of the anchor of the movement, but there's so much possibility for what surrounds it. We are in over 300 languages, over 100 of them very actively developing. Over 80,000 active contributors a month, 57 plus million articles in Wikipedia, 57 million files in Wikimedia Commons. And actually, this is out of date, over 70 million items on Wiki Data. All available under an open license for the world to reuse and explore. And of course, this is all powered by a global community. And this community is united by a common vision of a world in which every single human being can freely share in the sum of all knowledge. And actually today, I don't know if people are aware, but today's a very special day. This is actually the 70th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And I think that kind of embedded, not explicitly stated, but embedded in that remarkable document is, I think, the assertion that knowledge itself is a human right. And I think that's sort of really what motivates everyone. That's sort of the common urge that propels every volunteer and every employee working in some of our organizations to do this work. Maybe that's a little too altruistic, I don't know, but it seems to be doing a lot of good. This is something I want to kind of clarify a little bit because it's a bit mysterious. What does the Wikimedia Foundation do? We are sort of this backbone organization of this vast distributed movement. A lot of the technology is centralized at the foundation, not all. Wiki Data is actually developed at another organization. Legal and comms and some of these functions are consolidated there. And I work in one of a set of community-facing teams that is trying to build capacity in the movement and create new space to create a more diverse movement. Figuring out how we can develop skills, battle some of the toxicity and some of the problems that we've encountered in our communities to allow that space to be created. And we believe that this can, over time, start to allow more diverse types of content to be created, more diverse types of partnerships to be formed, and from there, more contributors, more content production, more consumption by the world, and feeding that virtuous circle. So this is sort of generally at a very high level how we're thinking about what we do and what our role is at this kind of meta placement at the foundation. And our team is focused on strategic audiences that we wish to engage in deeper collaboration, and the communities of practice within the Wikimedia movement who are especially focused and passionate about engaging those allies. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about one of these important communities of practice that we call the Glam Wiki community. This is some of them are here with us in this room. These are members of the Wikimedia community who kind of specialize in reaching out to cultural institutions to form partnerships, to move open license digital content into our ecosystem, to gain from the expertise held in these institutions, and to collaborate as natural allies. And this has resulted in hundreds of partnerships around the world. So this is a bit of kind of the classical story of Glam that I'll run through quickly. The first steps were a little bit more rogue, kind of working around the no photo policies in museums, snapping pictures and putting them in Wikipedia to kind of illustrate articles. But quickly this developed into more proactive, intentional forms of outreach and partnership building. One of the first content partnerships that resulted in kind of large uploads of open license material from a cultural institution was with the German Federal Archives, or the Bundesarchiv, in 2008. And just to give you a sense of the reach that this achieves for museums and archives who have invested a lot in their own digital infrastructures and collections platforms, but struggle to reach wider internet-scale audiences, this collection since 2008 has received over 14 billion page views on different Wikipedia pages and different Wikimedia projects that it's being used for illustration and so on. Over 180 million page views just last month. So it's just to give you a sense of the scale of reach that collections can achieve by becoming part of our ecosystem. Another example of an item and how it finds its way into the project, a picture of Bertolt Brecht in the Japanese article on Germany as part of illustrating the cultural life of Germany. So just to give you a sense, and that article has received 65,000 views just last month. an amazing small collection from the Museum of Veterinary Anatomy in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Just a collection of just 650 images is used on over 336 pages across 47 wikis and received 6.3 million file views just last month. So, sorry to hit you with that scale, but I think I wanted to emphasize that that's been sort of the pitch so far. Work with us to achieve great reach. You know, we have a common goal of the diffusion of knowledge. This is just another example of how that veterinary anatomy collection finds its way into Wikipedia. And a very well-known recent open access project from a major museum, the Metropolitan Museum, has kind of felt like almost the crescendo or the kind of climax of this period, where not only was the sharing of content successful, it's really been incorporated in a very high-profile way into their digital strategy and the way they talk about what they're doing. That they need to push. They make a priority of pushing beyond their own digital platforms because there really is a limit to how much of an audience you can attract to your own sort of digital replication of your own building. And this is just an example of how the Metropolitan Museum has illustrated the kind of comparison of the red bars are the amount of traffic these particular items get on their collections website. And this is how much they get on English Wikipedia and then other language Wikipedias. So it's just really kind of a different order of magnitude. So eyeballs, scale, reach, this is definitely a benefit. But I think this is, just the tip of the iceberg of what we can achieve together. And we are, as a movement, taking kind of a collective step back, kind of noting our improbable success. And wondering how do we actually stick around in a rapidly changing world. I mentioned the rapid shift to mobile, not taking for granted that our position in the internet ecosystem is secure or stable, and really taking stock of how we do need to diversify, how there are very many missing voices, a lot of missing knowledge, a lot of people who would maybe like to contribute but don't know how. And so we're really trying to kind of take a step back and think about a larger potential shared purpose with some of our allied sectors. And this is part of a kind of a 2030 vision that we've been establishing. And it all kind of boils down to this high-level aspiration that Wikimedia will become essential infrastructure for the ecosystem of free knowledge. We've sort of accidentally become that in certain ways, the way we kind of are almost symbiotically woven into search results. And we are just sort of almost a kind of a go-to resource. But this is kind of by accident and kind of just happened organically. We're now asking, how do we sort of intentionally develop as an infrastructure for knowledge allies like libraries and archives and museums and many other sectors who have a shared pursuit of the dissemination of knowledge. And there's a lot of emphasis in our strategic language about creating space for the full breadth of human diversity, which has always been our aspiration, but we are far from achieving that. And there are a couple core pillar concepts in the strategy. One being knowledge as a service, which is sort of riffing on some kind of Silicon Valley kind of tech language about APIs and sort of services, but really kind of, I think, captures how we're looking for our knowledge to be more kind of readily on tap, where it's really easy to kind of weave it into other applications. You don't have to hack it and scrape it, as the DBpedia team has brilliantly done. That this can be more readily consumable and repackageable and reusable. And this creates an amazing opportunity for our youngest project, Wiki Data, which was launched in 2012, so it's just a little 7-year-old, but has already been kind of rapidly growing to be, I think, our most important project that is in some ways shifting the whole paradigm of knowledge, which has been so encyclopedia-centric in our movement, but is now kind of showing a whole different kind of possibility. Just to kind of give you the basic kind of profile of what Wikidata is, it was originally, in a not dissimilar way to how DBpedia was created, sort of a kind of a composting and a parsing and a scraping and a recompiling semantically of knowledge in Wikipedia into structured semantic relationships. It is, of course, unlike DBpedia, it is directly an editable human collaboration project, and it is currently at over 7 million entities. It is inherently multilingual, and entities are fundamentally machine readable, and they can have languages in about 300 different labels in about 300 different languages. And it also has become really important, and I'll get to this more in a second, as a kind of a hub of hubs for different controlled vocabularies that different institutions and other kind of knowledge sectors hold. So this is just a kind of a bit of an oversimplified view of just what the data model is. Basically, the core unit of Wikidata is an item. this is an item for a famous author. It could be the planet Earth. It could be the city of Delhi. It could be a particular protein function, the concept of death. These can all be items. And then they are described, they have labels that could be in every language, and then they are described by statements, which are engaging properties. And so these are all arranged into different webs of knowledge and interconnection. And it has an API and a query service where you can start to look laterally across all this different knowledge. Knowledge that we actually do have in Wikipedia, but you couldn't ask these kinds of questions of it. And some of the kind of questions that Sebastian was describing before. And Wikidata was originally created for sort of internal reasons. As Wikipedias were growing and multiplying in different languages, there was there was a need for a central storehouse of facts and concepts. The info boxes that DBpedia kind of has famously and very successfully mined and semantically scraped had to all be maintained individually. And so common facts like the population of a town or the identity of a mayor would have to be changed manually in each different edition. So if a mayor of a small town in Hungary dies, he should die everywhere, right? So, but in this case, you would have to, and this is not a mayor of a Hungarian town, this is actually a famous Hungarian Indian painter. But this is just an illustration of how these info boxes would vary, but ideally with the same information across many editions. So the idea was to create this central storehouse of facts that could auto-populate all these info boxes and interwiki links. So this is the result in Wikidata of the item for Amrita Shergill. And as you can see, when you open up the label section, you can see all the different, the multilingual capability, all the different translations that the users can put in there. And that starts to kind of power the kind of sort of the central purpose across the diversity of languages in our movement. And so here's two examples of two info boxes for this person that are dynamically generated from Wikidata in the West Punjabi Wikipedia and in the Spanish Wikipedia. So not all Wikipedias are using Wikidata to the same extent. It's actually a little controversial, having data that is maintained in a different project. There's editorial control concerns. So there are divides and sort of debates within our movement. It's not a kind of uniform perspective on Wikidata. And that's actually one of the interesting social processes that's happening right now in our movement. So there's a lot of interesting ways that Wikidata is starting to be used quite ambitiously by many institutions, and I wanted to just tour you through a few of them with a focus on libraries. So one thing that we're seeing libraries do with Wikidata is bring it directly into catalogs to enhance the discovery. So we see here a library catalog in Canada that is incorporating Wikidata terms to kind of create new discovery paths out of an item record. There's a service called Library Link that is serving many public libraries in the United States that is doing a lot of kind of mapping and enrichment and kind of entity extraction and then creating new discovery features in catalogs, in many different catalogs. So if you scroll down this item record, there's a whole sort of more about this author section with facts taken from Wikidata, and then you've been able to kind of disambiguate different variations of the author's name to reliably aggregate the other works that this author has. So it's solving problems for libraries of kind of messy data and inconsistent data. This is a different view of that same Wikidata item. Wikidata, again, I think will get to be better known to the world through different interfaces. It's kind of almost infinitely reconsumable. So this is just another interface to Wikidata called a Reasonator that arranges it in a more compact way that allows me to show you more of the item in one screenshot. So here's the item for Amrita Shergill, and you see on the right, this is various authorities, various controlled vocabularies, other controlled instances of this person that have been mapped to the Wikidata item. And this creates an amazing kind of lattice work of knowledge where Wikidata can serve as a hub for all these different controlled usages of this term. And this has become a major area of interest to libraries, understandably. Authority control is a perpetual challenge. Our communities have been matching all these kind of identifiers through some volunteer-built tools called, the most famous called Mix and Match, where you can, it breaks it up into bite-sized chunks. Takes in whole vocabularies, whole dictionaries, and tries to match them automatically to Wikidata terms and asks people for validation. And some of it gets woven into even more game-like interfaces with sort of micro-contribution task flows. But this is not just a kind of an edge case. This is really kind of starting to go mainstream. Earlier this year, the Library of Congress, for whom about 650,000 identities were already mapped went ahead and tried to flesh that out and now has over 1 million entities mapped to Wikidata and is maintaining them in its linked data authority service. So this is a mainstream activity in libraries. It's not just sort of an edge experiment. So I think that this starts to give a sense that Wikidata, in my view, and I think in many's view, really marks the beginning of a new way of working with Wikimedia. Whereas before, Wikipedia was sort of a destination, Wikidata allows itself, and also the way it hooks into our other projects, offers itself as a connective tissue for knowledge that can be woven into all kinds of different purposes, many of which we ourselves have not yet imagined. And not surprisingly, there's an increasing interest in the underlying software of Wikidata, Wikibase, which we did not expect and we're not really planning for. But we're seeing libraries actually saying, we don't want to just map our data to Wikidata. We actually want to manage our own data in the same way. And yes, maybe have it communicate and federate, but really use this as our own system. So we are actually seeing more libraries trying to set up Wikibase instances and setting this and testing this as their own infrastructure. Where the German National Library is doing a pilot kind of to mount their entire authority file system in Wikibase. The French National Library collaborating with ABES, which is sort of the union catalog of higher education in France, and they apparently notoriously never collaborated. They are collaborating right now to work on a shared Wikibase instance for French authorities. And the French National Library is actually also using it for their catalog. And even OCLC has been doing a prototype with Wikibase, which is interesting. Many brilliant, wonderful people, many of them Wikimedians, work at OCLC, but I think it's safe to say their business model is not necessarily compatible with open data, so that is even a bit of a concern. But I think it shows how viable this is starting to become as an option. Although I do think there's a lot of work that needs to be done technically to make this fully scalable. Just want to be clear. So, moving out of the authorities use case, we're actually also seeing libraries, archives, museums describing the collections themselves in Wikidata, using Wikidata as a metadata repository for unique and rare heritage items. And there's been some really interesting experimentation here at the National Library of Wales, which also incidentally made their Wikimedian residents their first national Wikimedian, made it a staff role and kind of exalted it as a kind of a national role, as sort of a national outreach and innovation role. This is Jason Evans, who's an amazing community member. And so they've been putting, again, I'm using the Reasonator interface, describing individual prints and other kind of visual works in Wikidata. And so this is just an item record, but in Wikidata of this print. And using that to kind of enrich, and also, as you'll see, translate the metadata. And this is sort of just a kind of an abstraction, a semi-abstraction that allows you to see how an image can sort of be represented by the concepts that are embedded within it. So this just gets to, that a picture is worth 1,000 words and 1,000 sort of entities and concepts. And this can then be used, again, to power lots of different visualizations and exploration tools. Again, it gives you a taste of what new kinds of collection browsing interfaces, what new kinds of experiences could be built on top of Wikidata as an infrastructure. This is a startup called Pedia, which builds timelines of anything you can think of, and it's all powered by Wikidata. So this is that print collection laid out chronologically. And here it is mapped. Here it is in a bubble graph looking at kind of the incidence of different terms. But you can also then flip the switch and take advantage of translations that were made. So here it is translated into Welsh, which is actually the primary language of their constituency, but was not something they were able to serve to their users. But through crowdsourcing activities, they've been able to translate this metadata into Welsh and then re-ingest that into their catalog. But why stop there? We have French, we have Korean, we have Arabic. So it's really kind of astonishing what you can do if you really fully engage Wikidata to develop your collections. And our community, not surprisingly, has had the same idea, and there's some really interesting projects like this one, the Sum of All Paintings, which is trying to build a kind of a comprehensive corpus of paintings that hang in public galleries around the world, and build sort of a massive data corpus with a normalized metadata model. And this makes possible browsing experiences that theoretically always should have been possible. The minute you thought of art collections being digitized across the world and uploaded online, you would have thought it would be possible to search them all in a consistent way. But of course, interoperability, metadata, always a challenge. But we have some really interesting prototypes being built in our community, like this tool Krotos, that allows you to kind of do a search and get sort of type-ahead suggestions, leveraging the depicts property in Wikidata's data model, which is, what is this picture depicting? So I can just start to type a biblical theme, Judith and Holofernes, and I'll get all these paintings from different museums across the world of this biblical theme. Or just something whimsical, like I want pictures of thunderstorms, and it'll leverage that depicts property and bring me stuff from all over the world, just showing me pictures of thunderstorms. It's kind of astonishing. It was sort of a dream machine that was never possible. And so we start to imagine, what does it look like for Wiki Data, but also all the Wikimedia projects, but with Wiki Data as a sort of connected loom to be a shared infrastructure for global heritage. And so this is, of course, not just about community effort and institutional partnerships. There's infrastructure needed to be built here. Our Commons platform, which is our media repository, has had nothing to do with Wikidata until recently. We've undertaken a project with the new kind of Glam wiki workflow that this is going to make possible, where a lot of the same steps are taken often in collaboration with the partner to prepare the data and get ready for a big upload. But then there's all these new post-upload steps that can be done with the structured data paradigm, hooking into Wikidata for universal concepts, and adding new descriptions and translations. Commons was always meant to be a multilingual platform, but it didn't organically play out that way. This now is sort of multilingual by default. Of course, people have to do the translations, but it is built that way by default. And we see, again, our community innovating. This is a community-built project with some grant support of a kind of an experimental art tagger that uses, again, that depicts field. What is this picture depicting? And it does some kind of clever things, too, where it'll auto-suggest some things based on other properties that this kind of art from in this kind of genre tends to have, and it'll sort of like filter what it's suggesting. And so we're starting to see new ways of contributing to Wikimedia, not just monolithic encyclopedia writing or just uploading photos, but small micro contributions, kind of crowdsourcing tasks that we've seen pioneered actually in libraries and archives and museums, the kind of things that my team used to build at MIPL, but also Google and other commercial companies who have broken up these complex data processing tasks into bite-sized, almost pleasurable little pieces. So we're starting to see new forms of contribution become possible that could open the doors to a wider range of participants. Of course, the kind of inequities, structural inequities of the world tend to play out in Wikimedia projects. And so this is actually a mapping of those paintings in the Sum of All Paintings corpus. It tells an all too familiar story where there's like a whole half of the world that is not being adequately represented. And this is not just around paintings and artworks. This is a map of geolocated Wikidata items, a snapshot from last summer, where you see, again, an all too familiar pattern of really consolidation in the global north. You'll notice in West Bengal a bright pink spot. There's been amazing effort by Indian Wikimedian communities to kind of change that, mapping, kind of documenting railroads, towns, temples, all facets of Indian life, and building that out. And our West Bengal community has been particularly enterprising, including due to the efforts of also one of our volunteers in the crowd here, Bodhi Mandal. So, an amazing kind of industrious Wikimedian. So this prompts us to ask, what does it mean to do Glam Wiki in a truly global way? We see all these possibilities. We see Wikimedia emerging as an actual platform that we could all build upon. And this leads us to the other kind of core pillar of our movement strategy, which is around knowledge equity. And this is really, we've sort of put this at the highest level of priority, that we must, if we are to live up to this vision, if we were to really kind of honor this belief that knowledge is a human right, it must include everyone. It must represent everyone. It must reflect the full breadth of human diversity and culture. And so one way that our community has been doing this for a while, and we're seeing new possibilities, is around more grassroots methods of knowledge collection and curation through campaigns and documenting living heritage. Our movement is famous for these great campaigns, these photo competitions like Wiki Loves Monuments, where communities are proactively going out there and photographing and documenting monuments and other kind of folk traditions. This is our Wiki Loves Africa campaign that has different themes each year. This is different kinds of work. So these are the seaweed harvesters. We're seeing innovation around these kind of new ways of enriching that material after the fact, harnessing the power of structured data and Wikidata that we're building into the Commons platform. So this is a game that was created called ISA that allows you to kind of basically create batches of content that are associated with a campaign and just mobilize people to enrich them and deepen the descriptions. So this material can be better discovered, can be more easily integrated into other content. How am I doing? Am I out of time? Okay. Packed a lot in here. And so you see, again, that in that way that the whales kind of abstraction was showed, this beautiful photograph, has embedded in it concepts that the community is teasing out and documenting and minting as new connections, weaving knowledge together, it's small, stitch by stitch, and of course, being able to translate those tags. So here it is in Arabic. So another way that I think we can do this is developing more intentional shared workflows with institutional partners. I told the story that was sort of the classical first wave of Glam Wiki work, which is like, hey, you've digitized a lot of material. Wouldn't it be great if it could reach more people? We have this tremendous reach of this platform. Let's work together, roll up our sleeves, and help get it into the platform. But what if we kind of develop more sophisticated collaborations with kind of grander designs, and even around building shared infrastructure? What if we were actually setting out the challenge of building digital libraries together? And this is actually something that we've been discussing with NDLI, with some members of our community over the last few days. We had Dr. Das mentioned in the opening keynote yesterday that we had a 4-hour workshop in the Central Library just down the way about how can the Indian Wikimedia communities work in a more intentional, strategic way with NDLI to both bring more content into the aggregation, to enrich and expand the metadata, which is a bit thin in some places, I think we can agree, and figure out how to make this a shared enterprise, and to really tap the crowdsourcing potential of the Wikimedia movement to kind of have this great shared result of a great free digital library for the Indian people. And so this actually brings me back to one of the big revelatory experiences I've had since I joined the Wikimedia movement. I was really very motivated to, in fact, right before I was applying for this job, the grant for structured data on commons was announced. And for someone working in the Glam sector for years and wondering, what is that global infrastructure that we're lacking? How do we take the sum of all these digital transformations that we're doing institution by institution and knit them into something together that's cohesive and interconnected and not just fragmented? So I was really drawn by commons and Wiki Data and Wikipedia and all these obvious opportunities. But the thing that I really have discovered, it's not Project Gutenberg, but is our Wiki source projects. Project Gutenberg was a formative project for me growing up in the internet. This is a digital library, considered the first digital library. It's older than me. It's 49 years old. And I just sort of took it for granted that there was a free collection of digital public domain text in my language. And I would feast on these books. I would make theater projects out of them. I would copy them and paste them and remix them. And I just sort of took it for granted that this is something that we have. It's part of the internet. But what I've seen as I've gone deeper into the Wikimedia movement and have a better sense of how it functions in a global context, I've seen that that Project Gutenberg is not available in every language. There is not that equivalent in every language. But Wikimedians are seeing to it that changes, and they're using our Wikisource platform to do it. This is basically a transcription platform, Wikisource, that takes digitized texts, sometimes mostly published ones, sometimes archival material, and it's a kind of a transcription and proofreading environment. It has OCR hooked into it, so it used to be really painstaking transcription for underrepresented languages. Now it's more proofreading and correction. And it's sort of a digital printing press. It goes through this workflow and then it outputs as popular reading formats in reflowable text, Mobi Reader, EPUB, PDF. And this is an amazing first order activity for Wikimedians in parts of the world where these digital libraries did not exist. And it's been a very moving experience to me to see that when I always thought of Wikimedia as an encyclopedia project or photo collection and media sharing, building digital libraries is actually a core Wikimedia activity. And that's been a real revelation to me, and it's something that I'm very driven to figure out how we can grow as a possibility. And so the conversations with NDLI these last days have been incredibly inspiring and exciting. And so this is actually, we were doing this is almost like a replay of a little demo we did, and I'm almost at the end here. In the seminar room in the Central Library, we were looking at okay, let's do a search for a very famous work of Bengali literature. Gitanjali, I'm probably mispronouncing it terribly. And first of all, you notice that a lot of the kind of copies are, not all, but a lot of them are in English. So there's clearly a lack of, not an insufficient amount of local language content in NDLI, and that's something that NDLI has been very open about, really wanting to improve. Then when you open up a specific record, this one from Project Gutenberg, the metadata is pretty bare bones, we could say. So we start to think, how can we start to kind of enrich the metadata records in the NDLI catalog using Wiki Data and using also Wikisource. And so here's a view of this work, Gitanjali, in Wiki Data, viewed in Reasonator. much more populated record, a lot of rich data, all structured concepts. This could become this could be used to map to authorities that NDLI uses, or it could become the standard for how it's creating lists of authors and works. And here it is flipped into the Bengali interface. So that's NDLI has been making a lot of progress translating its interface, the buttons and the navigation, but actually translating the metadata, actually translating the stuff that describes the content. That would be quite a win. So we already see the potential. This data exists, so how do we stitch it together? Also in Bengali Wikisource, also the work of the enterprising Bodhi Mandal. I just want to give a big shout because he's doing amazing, amazing work in our community. Building lists of authors that are actually powered by Wiki Data. And you can start to use this as a way to kind of build wish lists for works that you'd like to bring into the digital library. Each author has kind of copyright assessments the community's made, comparing jurisdictions. Because this is a US hosted site, we have to actually honor US copyright law and Indian copyright law to know if this can be freely shared. But the Wikimedians are doing this. They're doing this rights assessment. They're gathering this data. Almost done. And this is reminiscent of work we're seeing in other open knowledge activist spaces in Latin America. These are not Wikidata powered projects, but they could be. We see in like Argentina or Uruguay, countries where there wasn't a central database of authors, like the library didn't maintain that, or there wasn't a sufficient database. And so these were activists who were trying to build digital libraries, release more literature in their language by local authors, but didn't have an author database they could check life dates against and do the copyright assessment. So they built author databases, but they've kind of bootstrapped them themselves. What if we worked together with Creative Commons and other allies to make kind of an author database in a box tool that had well-documented workflows of building these author lists in Wikidata, just like our Bengali Wikimedians have done, and powering easy browsable interfaces to do copyright clearance. There are even some amazing tools that have been built, in this case in the Netherlands, where there are critical masses of data in Wikidata about European creators and artists, that they're actually built workflows to do automated copyright research to say, like, hey, we have all these creators in Wikidata. Let's take the works and let's just run the numbers and see which of these are cleared for opening up. And then, of course, this can create wish lists for material that has not yet been digitized. So again, just right here, in a kind of a slapdash way, just kind of coming off the excitement and the heat of these conversations we had just in the last few days in the seminar room in the Central Library with NDLI. Just want to kind of give a taste of how can we imagine bigger? How can we imagine not only working together and having the obvious benefits of being part of the Wikimedia ecosystem, but really look at ourselves as fundamental allies who can engage in long arcs of shared effort and really see ourselves as deep, deep collaborators. So let's do this. Let's build digital libraries for the people in their mother language all over the world, and certainly in India. And to discuss over tea, what else could we do? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Quite an inspiring. It's quite an amazing to see the Wikipedia and the background work that is going on to make it much more useful. Obviously, you don't wish to have any questions,
Sir,
I guess.
Excuse me, sir.
No, just only one question because we are running out of
Sir.
time. Yep.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, I'm speaking. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Good afternoon, Ben. Actually, I have a project like we are having question papers for our semester question paper for our institution. For every semester, there are exams for UG and PG. I'm having question papers from 2000 onwards, digital question paper. Now, what I did till now, I have uploaded all the question papers in Wikimedia of my own server, taken the source from your website, that source software. Now, what I am trying to do, that the students will give answer to the questions, and students themselves will rectify the questions. With a vision, like in a gap year of 5-10 years, I will have an answer repository of a huge question bank. Now, I want to take your suggestions. What are the points where I should focus for doing such type of crowd answering system? 1. 2. If I want to index the whole answers, question and answers in another indexing server, like NLI or solar, anywhere. So what will be my technology or the protocol using which I will be able to harvest the information?
Wow. That is an amazing scenario, and to be honest, I don't know if I can give you a satisfying. It's a very complex thing to imagine, which is exactly what I invite everyone to do. But I would suggest we follow up on that after we're teaching. I think that's a bit more in depth. And have that chat with NDI. We were literally talking about this the other day, that there's this kind of vast market for. So this is the same project. Okay, good. So, sorry, I haven't connected the dots. I think let's talk about that more. We have, again, members from we have folks from the CIS, the Center for Internet Society, Access to Knowledge Program in Bangalore, who are our main media and organized groups in India. Let's brainstorm that together. I think it's a bit more complex, so we're in a quick Q&A, but
Okay,
really
okay, sure.
and I love the scale that you're thinking.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben, once again.